Hello, reader. I'm Alix.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is the LitJoy Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our Valeris Bookshelf Alley. This is from A Court of Thorns and Roses, ACOTAR by Sarah J. Maas. Bookshelf alleys are these really beautiful three-dimensional light boxes that we create, and we made them to look like the shape of a book, so they just fit like an alleyway between your books on your bookshelf. They're beautiful. This one in particular features Reasend and Favorite at Starfall. It is one of our most popular items of all time, and so we're able to work with Sarah to bring it back into stock for a pre-order event. So the event is happening from January 24th to February 15th. It is just only in that window. We're collecting pre-orders before we place the order for this bookshelf alley. We wanted to make sure it was a pre-order so that as many people could get it as possible. And you can sign up to be on the wait list right now. If it is not the 24th yet of January, you can sign up for the wait list at litjoycrate.com/Valeris. That's VELARIS. That's where our wait list is happening. It's basically just a notify me list that lets us know that you're interested, and we will send you an email when sales open so that you can come and get your bookshelf alley.
We also want to tell you guys about our reading journal that we have in stock right now. This is one of my favorite items that we've ever created. It is something that we try to keep in stock at all times, and it's perfect right now with the new year happening. It's a great way to keep track of your reading goals. There are so many different kinds of pages in there that are interactive. We've got lots of fun pages for tracking the books you've read. You know, there's book to movies. There's lots of pages where you can keep track of the books from all over the world. I'm trying to remember what that page is.
Yeah, there's like world travel pages.
Yeah.
There's also like bookshelf pages where you can fill in your book titles and color them in. So it's just like a really beautiful way to interact with your reading.
I love it because then you can really just keep track of your review, your star rating, your thoughts, a favorite quote, things like that as well. And these are perfect for book clubs. I actually did give these out to everyone on my book club last year. Everyone's very excited to start filling them out. So just wanted to remind everyone to go check out those reading journals, and they do come in several colors.
We're super stoked today to be talking to you about a topic that is near and dear to our hearts.
That's right. Today, we're going to talk about books for deep and interesting conversations, and they can be perfect for book clubs for this reason, which is something that we are very close to, as I've been running a book club.
We are adept.
Yeah, my book club's called Delicious Reads because we're always craving a good book.
And that's a fantastic tagline. It deserves a moment.
Thank you.
Yes.
And it's been going for close to 18 years now. And so it gets brought up here and there on our podcast. So I was like, I'll just make the statement. I have a book club called Delicious Reads. Yep. And over the 18 years, we've read obviously a lot of books, and we decided to compile this list of books that have been some of our best discussions. Doesn't always mean it's our best book or our favorite book, but it has led to some of our longest, deepest, most interesting discussions. And this is going to be a 3-parter.
Yep.
Because we had so many good ones to talk about. And
I love it.
So for this first part of the episode, we're just going to talk about the first 7 books that have really made an impression on us at our book club, where everyone was super engaged and had a lot to say.
And I'll just make note that these are 21. There'll be 21 total for now. And I don't think it's like an exhaustive list. I just think it's like at some point you have to be like, okay, you have enough recommendations. Now do it. Start the book club. Do the thing, And they're really great. I mean, no matter the size of your book club, these are just all really great reads that can kind of get discussions off the ground. Mm-hmm. I find that a lot of book clubs struggle with how they pick their books, or they just pick whatever new release is recommended.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can kind of peter out. Like the book club can kind of like die off because the discussions are not as engaging, or the books aren't as gripping. Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of just like giving you a head start if you are looking for a really good book club read.
Yeah. And we've talked about starting or putting together an episode about starting a book club.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think we'll get to at some point next year. But even if you're not in a book club, these books that we're recommending are just wonderful books to engage with other people to discuss. It's a conversation starter.
Yeah. Even if the conversation is like online with online friends, they're great.
And several of these, as well as we go through the list, are some really like New York Times bestselling books, and some you've never heard of. And I think it's a really great list. I'm excited to dive in.
All right, let's do it. Let's go on, or let's jump right in. The first one is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I will say Blake Crouch books in general, regardless of where you start with Blake Crouch, I think any of them can lend to great discussion.
Oh, yeah. He's so gifted.
I know.
The stories he puts together are so dynamic and enthralling. I don't feel like I can ever see where the story's going.
Yeah.
And that's the best part, right? You are just being led along in the most delicious way because it is like this little candy trail for me when I'm reading Blake Crouch books. And I'm just picking each piece of candy and I'm just like, where's it going? And I'm happy about the whole journey.
So I'm like, for readability, Blake Crouch keeps you engaged the entire time. Specifically with Dark Matter. So Dark Matter is a story. I'm going to grab the main character, Jason Dessen. Oh. He experiences this. I mean, it's a completely life-changing experience where he's walking home. He lives in Chicago, and he's essentially like kind of like abducted by, or he like a bag's put over his head or something
like attacked.
Happened. Yeah, he's attacked, and essentially like the attacker says something like to the effect of, "Are you happy with your life?"
Yeah.
And then when he wakes up, he's no longer in his life, and there's like this eerie quality to everything that Blake puts out there that he makes the reader question their own humanity.
And reality.
Yes. And so his stuff always has a science fiction element to it.
Yeah.
Whether it's like a multiverse or time travel or yeah. So those are kind of the two that are standing out to me the most, that have kind of woven through his books in different ways.
What other books have you read of Blake Crouch?
So I read Wayward Pines, which is a trilogy, but they're very short. Each book is kind of like a novella almost.
And that's one that has a TV series or a movie?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that one I didn't see things coming in any of them. So I read Dark Matter, Recursion, Wayward Pines, and then I watched Good Behavior, which doesn't have science fiction, but that's freaking dark. That's a dark series.
I've done Recursion and Dark Matter, but you've definitely read more. So
yeah, I'm like highly recommend all of them, but I will tell you like plan on it being your whole weekend because you won't put them down. Do you remember anything specifically from Dark Matter that book club really talked about a lot? I mean, we interviewed Blake Crouch, so that was rad.
It was really cool because we read this book for my book club that was during COVID. We pick out our books a year in advance, and so we knew a whole lineup. COVID hits, we immediately just shift to going online.
Yep.
And this time everyone's bored in their homes, crafting, meditating. I just remember everyone was like,
I was like, I did cross stitch for a day and was like, nope.
I remember that. Everyone was trying to fill their time is what it felt like because we were all just collectively in it together. And so we were like, well, what's the worst that could happen? Well, let's just ask Blake if he'd want to join us because he's probably just in a home puzzling too, And he was so gracious and kind and was just like, yeah, I'd love to talk about this with you guys. And he did. He hopped into our online Zoom book club meeting. It was incredible and was able to talk through a lot of the plot points with us. And what I remember is just, it was the reality twisting that everyone had a hard time like getting past in the sense that so the main character we talked about, Jason, he wakes up and it's like his wife isn't his wife and he never had a kid in this new reality. And it is, how do you say it? Like such a mind F in all of a sudden, like what would you do if you literally woke up and it's like you're in a different universe or you have a different reality happening? And it gets
like
so
a
much
multiverse kind of experience. But it's not like Ant-Man traveling through the multiverse for funsies. It's like there is this, it's like theoretical physics. Mm-hmm. And a lot of physicists just feel like there is concrete evidence of a multiverse, right?
Yeah.
And because matter appears and disappears in our universe. And something that's interesting about it, so the question he kind of asks is like, if you could see the unlimited, the infinite different possibilities for your life, what would that look like? And he created a metaphor, like a visual metaphor for that, for the character to travel through these doors into these different, and sometimes he is entering a post-apocalyptic, sometimes he's entering a life that actually he's famous, a life, and it has kind of that library, midnight library feel to it.
Yeah.
But instead of going into books, you're kind of going, there is a haunting quality about it.
Yes. I was going to say that's the distinguishing factor for me between those two books.
Yes.
Similar idea, completely different vehicles about how they go about it. And with Blake Crouch, you're going to get that suspense behind it, where you're all, something's not going to go right.
Yes.
You kind of have that feeling. Versus,
the stakes are high. The sacrifice is very high in that book.
And each door he goes through, like, you're tense. It's like I was holding my breath, like, what's he going to fall into now? Whereas like Midnight Library, it was like this beautiful exploration is what it felt like. I mean, there was hard times too, but and so the quality that way is different completely, but very similar idea. And even to the very end, that was heart-wrenching.
I know all of his endings, I feel like have...
Are we spoiler-free in this episode?
Yes, spoiler-free.
Okay.
So I feel like Blake Crouch's endings leave you at the perfect moment for discussion.
Yes.
And so they really lend to like, well, now even if I'm just having this conversation with myself, I'm asking a lot of questions. I think the biggest question I asked myself when I was reading this is just that main question he poses is like, are you happy with your life? Because you start to question, like, if I was this person and I have my existing family and then it's taken away from me, but the other options are limitless, you start to think about like, okay, what is it about my life that I love that I would fight for?
Yeah.
And I felt like that was a really great discussion as a book club. Some people were really open about like what it made them question and what it made them deeply appreciate about their life.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that metaphor of if you go and take all of your troubles and put them, like they put them into a stone and then put them on a mound of stones with other people's troubles. And then you get to pick which one you take back home to carry. Everybody just takes their own back home to carry. Yeah. It's kind of one of those things when you're reading this book.
That's right. I'm like, that was a really good discussion that we had where everyone got kind of vulnerable and talked about that. If you like Blake Crouch or if you like Andy Weir, I feel like, or if you haven't read one or the other, they're similar in that they base a lot of things in reality, actual science, as, you know, astrophysics, whatever it is. Like they use a lot of things that are based in our reality. And then they throw in the touch of things that are from a like kind of blows up your mind as to what could be possible.
They make it human.
They make it very human. They make it almost seem like the real, like the Matrix is real, right? And I was like, they should write a book together.
Actually, did you?
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. I was like, Andy Weir is much more optimistic, I feel like,
I agree.
than Blake Crouch.
I agree.
But they both do have like this humor, dark humor that runs through it. At least 50% of physicists believe that we are in a simulation. And I was like, just let that like, I was like, wait, what?
Simmer.
How many?
50%. A simulation.
Yes. So I read an article.
Interesting. Is it almost like the end of, you know, the Men in Black? That kind of simulation?
Kind of. I think
we're just marbles in the universe.
Yeah, I think it's more like space-time. So we live in a space-time continuum, but time-space is like the quantum realm. And so there's a lot of physicists who are like, no, the quantum realm is, if you were to define reality, which, and I'm like, this is getting into like a lot of nerdy documentaries that I watched. But essentially the idea is like space-time is just what we're experiencing, but time-space might be more of like where creation really happens, or like the soul level or like energetics. Or,
I think we both believe in that.
I was like, I think it might be both, but I like the physicists are like, let's make everyone uncomfortable always. It's the best.
That's what they're good at. No,
I know.
So
I was like, I feel like we talked
about dark matter, but again, like if we're talking this much about it, just trying to explain it, that's where you know, like, and we're trying to hold in all the spoilers. That's the part that I'm finding difficult. So I'm like, just read it. It's gonna be a great book. And let's move on to the second book.
Yeah, I know. Let's
do it.
Okay, The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. Just my number one recommended book in general.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So this takes place, this is Isabelle and Vienne, I think. Let me look. Yeah, Vienne and Isabelle are sisters in France. And this is the book begins at the very beginning of World War II. Yeah. And this is German-occupied France, which is a very unique perspective, I feel like, compared to a lot of historical fictions I've read about World War II.
Yeah.
That you're getting the perspective from two French women. They're not Jewish. They do have a Jewish neighbor. Well, Vienne does.
Yeah.
And they're very different personalities, the two sisters.
Yes, they definitely, experience it in different ways and how they want to participate or not. And they have different circumstances as to how that plays out. It was a really unique book about World War II. I think throughout the years of my book club, we've read like 20 different book clubs or books, around World War II. And this was definitely probably one of the most poignant ones we've ever read, the most heartfelt. It was more of a unique. And then I'm like, and The Book Thief, right? Like, I love that you and I both have our own favorite World War II for different reasons, but I loved this book. And I think you were fairly new to my book club at the time.
I was.
And you went all out for it. Like, you hosted this one and made it really beautiful.
Thank you.
We had our little branches and we had to write some things on those.
Yeah. So Vienne, one of the two main characters, so it's called the Nightingale because it's based off of a true so she, Kristin Hannah took some liberties with the story, but essentially there was a woman who helped many downed ally, so American, English, Australian, like fighter pilots who crashed in France. She helped them cross over the mountain range into Spain so that they could get to the embassy, so they could either go back into the war or go home if they were injured. And they're massive mountains and it's really treacherous. And she would make this trek with them multiple times through the winter. And so, one of the characters in The Nightingale is loosely based off of that woman. And the other character has children and she has to keep her children safe while her husband is at war.
Fighting, yeah.
And her home is German occupied. There's a
German captain?
Yes, there's a German captain who lives in her home with her. And so it is such a impossible situation.
Yeah.
But there's so much courage. And so I think that's why I love it so much, is I think it's one of the most courageous books I've ever read.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Those women really put it all out there to help in any, they probably felt like it was a small way, right? But we're like, obviously it was such a large way that they helped. And I just think about being a mom with kids stuck with an enemy living in my house. Oh my gosh. Like every day you have to put on your mask for your kids, right? And try to find peace and create that situation in the house. And it was an interesting relationship. There was tension there for sure. But I feel like by the end, anyways, I can't get into it, but the courage, like you said, and the ability to stay resilient and to keep focus on what was important, and to make it good for their kids as much as possible. Incredible mother.
Well, and I think it showed us a couple of things that were interesting to talk about. It was interesting to talk about how courage looks different. Not all courage looks the same, because I think that most people would look at courage as being the person who was smuggling soldiers out of France and putting yourself in danger in that way. But then you saw courage in the other character she's being courageous because she's saving her children and other children by keeping them alive.
Yeah.
And what she's doing feels smaller, but at the end of the book you realize that that smaller effort made a huge difference. And and I think that I loved that we were able to talk about that. It also, we talked about how like nobody wins in war.
Yeah.
Which I think is just a lesson that humanity has to learn over and over again, is that there are no real winners when it's war.
Just this conversation is reminding me about all the books, like I mentioned, that we've read around this topic. And I'm curious, there's a few others I'd probably suggest if this topic in general is one you're interested in for you or your book club. The other ones that we've also had really good discussion around, if it's okay, is Unbroken. Yeah, by Laura Hillenbrand, I think. Unbroken was another really interesting read about some people who were fighter pilots and they crashed in the ocean and got captured by the Japanese and went through some torture. And that experience as well. It's very human. It's very raw. And it's very motivational. It's why I appreciated it, because sometimes you read them and they're just heavy the whole time. There's heaviness for sure. But we had an incredible discussion around that as well. The other one that it reminded me of was Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys.
Oh yes, that one was a very unique perspective as well.
I'm trying to remember where they were.
They were in Siberia, I believe.
They got taken out
into Russia.
Yes. So they were Jews that were taken to
it wasn't, and it wasn't just Jews, but yes. So they were
They were sent to a camp.
But no, I think that they were Jews from Siberia or from Russia or something. Something happened.
No, they got put on the cars and they spent days heading out there
to do work.
To just do work. It was just another camp, but it was in Warsaw or something. No, that was Poland.
Yeah.
So you're right. Well, I think it was further on the fringes.
The Between Shades of Grey.
Not to be confused because these books came out literally within a couple months of each other, 50 Shades of Grey and Between Shades of Grey. Very different books. But this one was an incredible book club book because we actually recreated a few of the experiences. We taped out on my floor the exact measurements of the train cars that the people were transported on. And and how many people were supposed to fit in that train car. And we had every single person in my book club stand up and try to fit into it. We were hanging on to each other. We couldn't even stand up straight. We had to hold on, and we were still too short for what they were packing in to these train cars. Yeah. And it just the realization really hit home, for a lot of people, as well as the food that they were given. We brought some of that out. And we're this is all you would get.
Yeah.
Basically.
That kind of reminds me, when we did the Nightingale one, we talked about, you talked about the tree, and in the book, there's a tree where she puts a ribbon on the tree for every person that she is kind of saying a prayer for that is no longer in her life because they're in a concentration camp or they were killed by soldiers and so we were able to put ribbons on a tree kind of representing the people we care about. And so what's really cool about some of these book club books is that there is the opportunity to create an activity around
an experience.
That helps you immerse yourself in the book more and I think connect with book club members more. So
shock. I love to create an experience and you curate it. Yeah. So that's kind of how my book club started is I wanted to curate these book experiences because that's how I experienced them. And I was baffled that not everyone else experienced books the same way. I was like, don't you understand how it brings this and this to life? And so that was kind of my starting point before LitJoy. And it all makes sense now, but
yeah, we were right. She's from Lithuania.
Yes.
And she does end up being put in a work camp in Siberia.
Perfect. So together we figured it out. High fives.
I know. Okay, so should we pivot to a more lighthearted one?
Yes.
I feel like yes. So Ready Player One by Ernest Cline.
Oh man.
This is just
this is like a nerd's dream.
Yes.
This is crack.
80s nerd.
Crack for anyone who loves gaming, 80s, who's just into almost like a Matrix kind of feel.
Pop culture.
It was so fun. This is such a fun book. Yeah. It is a standalone.
It should have been a standalone. I'm confident Ernest
There is Ready Player 2.
Which is...
we don't talk about it.
Yeah. It's okay. I'm let's focus on the great.
So... the main book, and then we don't need to talk about the rest of it.
Yes, so essentially it's in the year 2044. It is science fiction, YA, fantasy, dystopian. I feel like Steven Spielberg did a fantastic job with the movie. The movie's a little bit more punchy and intense than the book. Both are delightful. Yeah. So essentially the world is just going to crap because of global warming and poverty, and there's really
AI.
Yeah, there's governments, but kind of not. And there's this computer game that's this virtual reality that everybody actually lives their lives in because they don't want to be a part of the real world. And it's all 80s themed.
Yes.
So it's Pac-Man and all of your favorite 80s, The Shining, 80s movies, 80s clothes are really in. Back to the Future is the ultimate.
Yeah. So the game, if I remember right, it's called The Oasis.
Yes.
So Wade's the main character. He's this single kid basically. And they are living in what's called, I think, the stacks.
Which is trailer.
They're trailers stacked high.
Yes.
It's crazy. How are they all okay? But so they go up with these trailer parks and basically everyone's, you mentioned, life's kind of in the gutter. It's gray. The world's not great. And so everyone lives in the Oasis anytime they have time.
Yes.
And they put on their virtual like reality, like goggle type things, and they can buy accessories. So it feels even more real.
Yeah, like a treadmill thing they can run on.
So they can like run
Yeah.
and they can upgrade all their system. And so everyone's earning money so they can just fully be immersed in this oasis. And in the oasis, there is a challenge, right?
Yes.
And the challenge is like, can you find, it's like these, is it 3 like Easter eggs?
Yeah, they're key. So it's very much set up like they're eggs, Easter eggs.
Yeah.
But they're set up very much like a video game. So there's like different challenges. So the Oasis is like limitless universe essentially, and they have to find the keys. And it's been years since the creator died.
Yeah.
And so no one's found him. And then all of a sudden the first key is found, and it has some hints as to like where to find the next keys. And so I'm
trying to remember what the reward, like, do they state what the reward is?
They are given the Oasis, like the ownership of it.
I just can't remember if that was a spoiler or not, but I was
which
like,
is like worth, trillions.
Yeah.
So I don't actually know the number, but anyways, it's like, it feels very much like Found Family, but super nerdy video game. And like the book club does it, like writes this up. I'm like, you could do 80s food. I'm like, like Twinkies and like, and then like 80s clothes, like the experience is so just fun. There.
When we did this for a book club, the gal who ran it, her husband has always been into video games. So she brought all of his old consoles. It was really fun because and like all the old consoles, all the old games just kind of like laid out and things like that. And we got to kind of all go down memory lane because we lived through the 80s. And so, it was...
We're that old.
I was like, we've been pretty honest about that.
Yeah.
And so we just got to walk through that whole fun 80s memory as well as just talk about the book, which was a pure delight. It was just fun. I love a good standalone read that it's a beach read, but not in that sense of just like read it and forget about it. It's a beach read in that it is just always fun read, no matter what time of year. But it stuck with me because we had so much fun so many fun things to talk about with this one. It was a joyful read. Yeah. So
lightens it up a bit from our list.
Yeah. I was going to say from World War II to that.
Yeah. And then we're going to take a hard left into Station 11. We wanted to interrupt this podcast to tell you about a very important event that is happening at LitJoyCrate.com.
Oh my gosh, tell us.
I know. On February 21st, Lunicorns will get early access to the Vampire Academy Collector's Edition box set. So this box set is gorgeous. It has features we've never done before, which we always try and do something a little special, but this one is pretty epic. It drops on February 21st to Lunicorns, and it opens to the public on the 22nd. And if you're like, Alix, what's a Lunicorn? I can tell you. A Lunicorn is our nickname for our membership group. Our membership group is a group of readers just like you, but they come back to LitJoy and get extra perks. So they have early access. There's Lunicorn exclusive items. There's extra Lunicorn discounts. And we have a Facebook membership group where we do lives and we reveal product ahead of time, where we ask a bunch of questions or feedback on what product we want or they want us to do. So it's kind of just like this really cool book club, nerdy book club that we have at LitJoy. So make sure to check out our Lunicorns membership. It's titled Membership at the top of our website. And if you're just here for Vampire Academy, it opens to the public on the 22nd. So,
so excited for this.
Yes, me too. This book, of all books I have ever read, I have never let a book ingrain its anxiety into my brain like this book.
Yeah.
But it is like one I recommend to everyone.
Yeah. If I remember right, this was on my top 10 list for a book of our very first episode of like most influential books.
Yes.
It is one of my favorite books, but it's not like my favorite book of all time, but it's because of the impression it left.
Yes.
That I recommend this one a lot.
For sure. So it's firmly in the world of dystopian post-apocalyptic, a virus. Okay, first of all, Emily St. John Mandel, who wrote it, she then wrote a book about how odd it was to be an author who wrote a pandemic book during a pandemic, and then a pandemic happened right after. So it was like very meta. That was Sea of Tranquility, which is actually a giant dried up sea on the moon. I'm all thoughts about that. I'm like,
but we digress.
I digress. Anyway, so in Station 11, this is written before COVID happened.
Yes.
But there is a pandemic that breaks out. And this book has multiple timelines as well as multiple main characters. So I think there's like 4 main characters and 4 timelines that are all happening, weaving together over the course of about 30 years.
Yeah.
And basically 99% of humans die.
Yeah. And become zombie.
Do they make it for a little while and then they're like out?
It's a combo. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're still out there. Like they still find them sometimes, but they would like almost turn into a zombie and then die.
Yeah. And it's like the virus is super aggressive. But I think it had a resurgence during COVID because so many people are like, oh my gosh, is this what's going to happen? And it was fascinating because there's moments in the book that you like have to talk about with somebody.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so good for book club. I'm like, was one of those moments for you that you're like, I have to talk about this with someone?
Well, first of all, our book club, again, was beautifully curated for this. It's because we were outside around a campfire at someone's house. You know, they had like this beautiful fire pit and we're just like hanging out outside in the dark with the fire, which is very reminiscent of the book as well.
Yes.
So we're like just totally immersed in it. And we all brought something. Do you remember that? We had to bring something that was like a memory or something that we would never want to forget or something like that. I'm trying to remember.
No, I think it was like, yes. Okay. So I can't remember the exact details of it, but I remember us all having like an item associated with like the end of the world because in the books, there is one of the characters. I mean, you can't really take much with you. A lot of people are nomadic, kind of in like these like traveling
little pods,
troops, like a theater troupe, you know. But one of the main characters, she had like this comic book with her that had no utilitarian purpose, but it was so fascinating because even in facing the end of the world, people are nostalgic.
Yeah.
And people are like still care about beautiful things.
Yeah.
Like even when the world is ending, beauty still has
They do
meaning.
Push like art and beauty and sharing those things. It did remind me, like, it has like the essence of The Giver in it.
Yeah.
To me, of wanting to hold on and remember certain things about society and what do you want to continue to share as you are going about this world that has 1% of the population left. And so they talk a lot about sharing like theater and arts and beauty, which kind of did remind me of Giver as well, just those memories. And so I think we all brought something that we talked about, like if you could only take one thing with you, like what would it be?
Yeah.
And then I remember the airport scene, which is...
You mean the airplane?
Yes. So...
Yes.
It's like,
there is a specific scene in the book. When you get to it, you'll know what we're talking about.
Let's just say it's a plane that lands, that the doors never open.
Yeah. Which is... It was
dun, dun, dun.
I still think about it every time I think about this book. I'll tell you times I think about it. I think about this book when I'm sitting in traffic.
Yes.
I think about this book when I'm boarding an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
I think about this book whenever there's a power outage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
like there's just no way to travel.
Anytime I hear about like someone claiming to be a messiah, I think about this book too.
That's right.
Like whenever there's like news around cults, I'm always like, oh my gosh.
It's happening.
I know.
The way that it was written, it felt so, again, tangibly realistic. So that's why it creeped us out so much, because it felt like this could literally happen tomorrow. And then like a couple of years later, COVID hit and we're like, oh no, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like we were worried this book was prophetic almost in how much crossover there was in some way. I mean, luckily the zombie part didn't happen, but
yeah,
you never know. Knock on wood.
I mean, I'm like, yeah, there is things about this book that I found really beautiful and things that were very terrifying. So I think the beauty I found in it was that like, while they hadn't figured out electricity at scale, like, or even at all, like electricity went out because electricians all died. Yeah. Like something as simple as that, like plumbing isn't a thing anymore. You know, while those things went away, what was so interesting is they had this innate human desire to remember, to mark history. Like they collected, for example, there's a group of people who the pandemic hit when they were quarantined at an airport, and then that just became their home for the next 20 years with strangers. Like they didn't know if their families lived. They couldn't get to them because they were all from other places in the world. And And they had a museum that was iPhones and
Artifacts.
Electronics from 20 years ago, because it's 20 years in the future after the pandemic. Yeah. And they just sometimes would come and look at them, and like kids who are born post pandemic, they are looking at this ancient technology of 20 years ago. Like there's no understanding of it. And so it's so interesting, these human behaviors of like, what would humans do if you're one of the last ones?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a traveling theater troupe because they care about art continuing.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. I'm like, you don't have electricity. and you remember what it was like, but that still feels like it's the most important thing you can do.
And it's probably why I have such a soft spot for the book, because it's a story about continuing, I feel like, to share stories too.
Yes.
And share those memories and the meaning and the art. And then on the flip side, obviously you're getting these horrors and the fear.
Yeah.
But that's why you've got the different timelines. You get different timelines of different people. And so all together, it kind of creates the picture. But it's not until they're finished with the book that you kind of put all the pieces together.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I don't know how to feel. I feel like that was hauntingly beautiful.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to describe it.
So,
I'm like, let's end on that note.
We, like I said, most of us in book club still talk about how this like lives with us.
Yeah.
It was very impactful for the whole group, not just you and I.
And I think it lives with us in a good way. Like, I'm like, even though it sounds kind of like dark and scary, I'm like, I think it is a good expose on humanity. So
do it around a campfire, guys.
Yeah. Also, we did like cans, but like really yummy baked beans in them. So we like cleaned out cans and then like used them as dishware. It was fun.
It was
really like we
good.
had some fun times.
And then I sent everyone home with like a s'mores kit. And that was just for funsies.
And that was fun.
That did not happen in the book.
No s'mores. Actually, no marshmallows anymore. Nope.
I'm
so sad. Okay. Moving on to a haunting magical realism / psychological thriller / gothic fiction. Very fairy tale vibes. We've talked about this a little bit before, but 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield.
Yes. This was a great one.
Great fun. Rad.
It's older-ish. Like it's been out for a while. But I'm like, for us, it feels like a classic.
Yes.
Everyone should read this one.
Yes. And I think that it gets, I was reading Goodreads this morning, kind of looking into this again. And for me, it was like a 5. But it's interesting because it does get mixed reviews. And I think it's because it kind of leaves you unsatisfied at the end. I love a standalone with a ambiguous ending to it. I think there's something really beautiful and poetic about it. So I was like, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Like I love that it leaves you guessing. For example, like in The Giver, you never know if the person who dies or the person in the end dies or lives. It's unclear what the ending means. And this is similar. It's not about life or death, but this is similar that there's a plot point that it could go either way. And it's like, you get to pick what you think it was.
Gotcha.
And so I'm like, I'll read this. I love this one sentence so Vita Winter she is a woman who is famous because of her 12 outlandish life tales. So she's like an author, and in the book, she's an old woman, and she has kind of teased the public that there's actually none of them are her real life story. They're just very interesting and outlandish, but her real life story is the 13th Tale, and she's like, I'm never going to tell it. And then as she's dying, she hires a biographer, Margaret Lee, to come and get her story. And 13th Tale is her real life story. It's so macabre. It's so creepy cool.
That's right. It's like all coming back to me. We read this one a while ago. So I'm like, thank you for the reminder. Tell me more.
Yes.
It has like that gothic suspense feel that I love, where it's not scary.
But it's haunting.
But it's almost like, I'm like, the visualization for me is almost like when you take a step and the floor creaks, but that's kind of what the story feels like when you're reading. It's like the little bit of a creaky floor kind of feel, but the windows are open and it's bright outside, but you're still like, wait, something's off.
It's haunting. Well, I'm like, okay, so the Englefield family is the main family in the book that in the 13th Tale of her life, of Vita's life. And there's this beautiful sister named Isabel. And she has a brother, Charlie, and Isabel gives birth to feral twins, Adeline and Emmeline. And so I will say trigger warning, there's like incest and sadism in this book, which is why it's creepy. And it takes place, it does feel like historical.
Yeah. Yes.
It's not a modern tale. Like it feels more turn of the century.
Mm-hmm.
And I love psychology. And so I'm like, I'm like, love that these psychological elements are woven through where, there's a ghost that's present at the house, and she isn't, like this ghost, I think it's a she, it's keeping people safe, but it's unclear if this ghost is real or not. And so the whole time you're like, something isn't happening. Like something isn't making sense.
When you get woven into her reality with the book, the realities all get kind of twisted. Yes. And there's also so many parts that it's hard. We can't really talk about it because it's spoilers.
I know.
And so I'm like, we're giving you a general overview on this one, but we're like, it's because we can't, because there's spoilers.
It's amazing.
But we're like, just read this. It's good.
Also, obviously you're listening to this, you probably care about reading a little bit. But if you love like haunted libraries and enchanted
books about books,
like there's definitely that vibe where it's like for people who love fiction and love books that are about books, this one has that element in it for sure.
Oh, and this is, I feel like, a good one that you could read. If I like to put books kind of where I think they fall seasonally, or if there's like a good month. And so I'm like, this one I feel like is perfect October through December.
Yes.
It could go great if it's a little more haunting in October, but it also has that like kind of wintry, solitary isolation vibe too. So is that a good way to put it?
Yes. It's like, like I think it takes place in England, right? Yeah. So like the cold, wintry moors.
There's like a chilliness about it. So.
Yes. If you love human psychology, this one is fantastic because there's impossible decisions that these characters have to, that a couple of characters have to make, and then everyone else is mentally ill.
Yeah.
And so like, how do you hold on to your reality when everyone else around you is creating false realities? And so it's so fun to like put yourself in this book and talk about it with other people.
Yes. Oh yeah. We had a really good discussion, I remember.
Yep.
But of course, that's why I made the list. So
yes.
Captain Obvious happening. So
it's okay. We're
going to move on. So sixth book is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, which again, we've talked about this a few times because it holds such a place in our hearts because it is unique. A book about a circus that has its own life, its own personality. And then there's these two main characters that end up having a bit of a romantic relationship within the book. But what's also interesting is there's like a dueling magician as well. There's like two magicians that are kind of going at it and dueling. Then there's the love interest. There's this mystical, magical circus, and each tent, it almost has its own life and personality as well.
It totally does.
And it's magical realism, as well as there's mixed timelines. Like there's a lot going on in this book, but in the best way.
Yeah. It is very immersive, atmospheric, I think is how Kim described it. It's in the Night Circus. The circus appears out of nowhere, it seems, right? In these different, so it's a traveling circus. And when you're a person living in these little towns throughout France, all of a sudden the circus appears and it only is open at night. It's all in shades of black and white. And it's like
the Cirque de Rêve.
And it's like caramel popcorn and candied apples and like, this like delicious sweets and treats kind of a thing. But you'll walk into a tent and it's like snowing, and you walk into another tent and it's like you're being transported into this performance, these ballet dancers, and another tent. It's like the tent of a seer and like an oracle. And then in the middle of it all is this beautiful clock that is woven into the story of these dueling magicians. And like, why is this, clock that's alive and has a personality? It's literally just like a clock. But I mean, so the story itself sets you up for such really beautiful, like if you want to wear themed colors or costuming, delicious foods that come out of it.
If I remember right, it's black, white with red.
Yeah, there's like little elements.
Because we all came with like, for book club, like with red scarves and things like that. Like that little touch of red and the stripes. And we turned the living room into a circus tent.
We used to have more time before LitJoy.
Before children.
And children.
You know, so like we try to create the tent feeling. And then we all try to bring some of the foods that were mentioned in the book, which candied apples and the little chocolate mice. And it was so fun. There's like this wishing tree that is in the book as well. Like the ice tent. Like there's so many cool things visually to bring to life as a book club. So it was super immersive just reading it. And then we also brought it to life. And it's to this day one of people's favorite book clubs we've ever done because it was, as you mentioned, so atmospheric and easy to bring to life in the sense of the book. But
yeah, and I think just the setting of the book itself lended to like a lot of book club discussion.
Yeah.
But also I think we really loved we talked a lot about the like the idea of doomed love, like forsaken love.
Like fated love.
Yeah.
Yes. It was so okay. I feel like this book in particular, I should warn people, it's a little divisive is that right? People like it or they don't. It's because the timeline,
it's lyrical.
The timeline shifts a lot. And so I was trying to keep track. So I knew how old people were and things like that. But also there's magical realism. And I feel like people either like magical realism or they don't. Where you just got to let go and go with the flow when it comes to that and enjoy what's happening into the story and just don't put too much pressure around it. And I love magical realism.
Yeah.
And it was a perfect blend, I felt like. So, and it was a debut. I'm always shocked that Erin Morgenstern, this is her first book, you know, and then she's done the Starless Sea since, but her writing does remind me a little bit of Laini Taylor.
Yeah.
Which we also love, very lyrical.
Yeah. I would say it's, and her books feel like they do feel like this meandering experience through magical realism as opposed to being like heavily plot driven, because there is plot, but it's also it's very much about the journey of getting there.
Yeah.
And I feel like the ending was lovely, but it wasn't what like brought the whole book together. The book was just this you felt like you were in a circus for the whole book. So it's just a beautiful experience.
Yeah. Reading Erin's books, it really feels like you're opening a door and you walk through and you're just in a completely different landscape, different location, different dimension even sometimes. And then by the time the book finishes, you walk out and you're on the other side. Like, it's an experience. Yeah. So that's why I'm like, read it. It's going to be good discussion for sure.
I agree. Okay. So the last book, we did want to save room on this first round for a nonfiction.
Yeah.
And this one, I feel like I feel like everybody should read this book. But when it comes to book club discussion, I feel like it's really great if your book club is an all women's book club, because it creates this opportunity for conversation that society doesn't always create for women. And so let's dive into the book.
I agree. I also think that this could be interesting if it was a mixed, like male and female book club.
Yeah.
I think it could be good, really powerful either way, but it felt really safe to do this discussion with all women. And we've talked about Come As You Are many times. It has been a really impactful book for us and many women that we have talked to who have read it. And when we picked it, we were a little nervous because this book is about sex, but it's not about the act of. It is about your perspective, your relationship with sex and sexuality, and your approach and your feelings about it. And when we picked it, everyone was kind of like, okay, like we'll give it a go. And then we had like this incredible turnout. It was like 25 people. And we were like, oh, do we have enough room? Yeah. So that right there said something huge that everyone who read it wanted to talk about it big time. And again, Alix hosted this one. So it was a really fun experience.
I tried to make an experience. So, okay, the full title is Come As You Are, The Surprising New Science That Will Transform Your Sex Life by Emily Nagoski. She's a Ph.D.
Yes.
So, Nagoski. I feel like the subtitle is more to sell the book or like get people curious. Yeah. But I didn't really feel like this book was fully about transforming your sex life. It does that.
Yeah.
But it also teaches you tools to learn about you and your sex journey. Like what is my sexuality? How do I own and empower myself sexually? How do I understand my sex drive? How do I understand what it means for me to be a person who does or doesn't want sex? And I thought it was just a very important book.
Yes.
For helping people love themselves and accept themselves. It's just been one of the most influential nonfictions I've ever read.
Yeah.
So what Emily sets out to do is she teaches us a couple lessons. The first lesson is every woman has her own unique sexuality, like a fingerprint, and women vary more than men in our anatomy, our sexual response mechanisms, and the way our bodies respond to the sexual world.
Yeah.
And so she removes so much shame that women have around sex.
Yeah. I'm going to step in because what I loved so much about the beginning of the book is she just strips away all the myths around it. She strips away all the notions that we have and how society has built up sex for women. Because up until very, very recently, and it's obviously still there and persistent, everything about sex, at least for a woman, is based on a man's experience. It's all based around a man. It's all based around what they experience and what drives pleasure for them. And that's all we knew, kind of a thing. Like, how does it make them feel? Is this creating that like porn experience almost, you know?
Is this like what it shows in the movies?
Yeah. Am I arching enough? Is this look like this? Am I having this experience right after? And, you know, and so she just kind of was like, this is all bullshit. It really is. And just breaks it down and shows you the science behind it, about how many women actually can orgasm in certain ways and why, and how there's nothing right or wrong. Everyone's bodies are perfect. Everyone experiences sex that's good for them. And just to not to believe all the propaganda that we are it's being shoved down our throats. Yeah. As a woman, at least. And I'm sure men too, right? Like, they're like, this is apparently how it's supposed to go.
Yeah. Like, this is how I should perform. This is how it should feel. You know, I just feel like the world gives a lot of obvious male-centric indicators of what sex should look like, because sex for men can look more obvious. Yeah. And she really breaks down like each of those stereotypes and removes that layer of shame that comes with them, that of like, well, that's not how it is for me, therefore I must be broken. That message that women are both the gatekeeper and fundamentally flawed in their sexuality is like cornerstones of my childhood, like of socialization. It was like, okay, you need to be a temptress in all these ways, but not until the opportune moment. Yeah. And you need to be desirable, but not too desirable, and only at the right times desirable. And then you need to perform, but if you perform to the wrong person or at the wrong time, you are definitely not gatekeeping in the way that you should, and not like, protecting men's morality.
You got to be the good girl, but not a slut.
Yeah.
That was my quick version of what you just said very eloquently.
Thanks. Like, you got to be sexual, but not slutty.
Exactly.
You need, and I'm just like, there's so many rules.
There's so many. It's like the Barbie movie that's recently come out, like the spiel there, like that is how women feel. There's no right way. Right. We're going to fail for all the standards that are set up. Like, how do we, there's no way to win.
Like, if you are too sexual, then like you are somehow harming women. But also, if you're not sexual enough and sexually free enough, then like, are you really even a feminist? Yeah. You know, like, so like we do it to ourselves too. We do it to each other. And this book was so fantastic in just like creating a safe container for us to talk about how infuriating it is. And some women were like, I always thought I had such a low sex drive and I thought I was broken until I read this book. Yeah. And then some women were like, I thought my high sex drive meant I was sexually deviant, that like something was wrong with me, that I had a high sex drive.
What an opportunity, right? That we were able to have a discussion with 20-something women about sex. That doesn't happen very often. And again, raised in our conservative religious culture, it is not happening. No. And it was a beautiful idea to do anonymous questions and topics that we at the book club, so nobody had put their name on it. And so we just read these anonymous questions and topics and answered them as a group so that everyone kind of felt like, okay, so that's normal, or I'm not broken. Yeah. Or somebody else feels like me. Yeah. So every time I talk about it, I get emotional because I was clearly in that category. And it was wildly impactful for me. I've read it twice since and recommend it all the time. Just because I don't want anyone else to fall into that trap that I did of feeling that way, because it's mine. And I let so many other influences affect what should have been something that I own.
Yeah.
And how I feel about it. And so I'm just like out here to shout the message. Take it back. It's yours. And you're perfect.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was a beautiful book
It was
club.
good. It was really interesting.
It did lend to like a really beautiful discussion, and a few things that I did because I really wanted to make sure it was that safe space.
Yeah.
A couple things I did with this book club is I decorated humorously. So I took pink streamers, and I kind of made them into the shape of a vagina at the entrance of my house. So like as you walked in, it looked like a balloon at the top.
One little bit.
And it said WELLCUM, like CUM, above it in balloon letters.
Yeah.
So I tried right away to kind of introduce a little bit of humor around the fact that we're going to talk about sex. And I decorated the rest of it with like pink and red heart balloons.
Yeah.
So, just a few things to like kind of create this humor around something that could be awkward. And then I love the anonymity of the questions that people got to submit. So they all got to write down as many questions as they wanted as discussion topics. So we had a list of discussion topics, but we started with those anonymous questions to kind of get things going, because I think it showed everyone like people were ready and willing to show up for each other. And so I loved that.
It was great. And I would highly recommend this one as a book club, just for, if nothing else, to give that space for people to feel like they can finally talk about these things that roll around in our heads that we don't usually bring up, maybe outside of one best friend.
Yeah.
So getting that collective perspective was so amazing and so helpful. So do that. And we're going to call this good for this
part
episode
one.
For part one. We've already talked 55 minutes,
Yeah,
which is great. We've got 2 more episodes that will follow this one up. And I'm excited to dig into the next 7.
Sweet. Thank you.
Thank you, readers.
All right, reader. Thank you for listening to the LitJoy Podcast. Make sure to rate and review us.
And like a good book, don't forget to recommend us to your friends.